Hello and welcome to video 2 in our series about Java GUI using the IntelliJ's built-in GUI editor. We are live from Studio C in beautiful West Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I am Mr. Coupry, here to take you on a tour of this code. Today, in this video, what we're actually going to do is provide the entire code to you without using the IntelliJ builder. Why are we going to do this? Well, by seeing how each of the components work together step by step, you'll have a better feel for what IntelliJ does for you. You'll have a better ability to troubleshoot errors, and you'll have the ability to just really understand kind of what's going on in the background so you can expand on your programs a lot more simply. The entire code I'm going to use today is provided in the comments below. What I encourage you to do is build along with me, and you'll notice that the parts of the code is commented out, and during the video I'm going to uncomment part of those code, explain what that does, and sort of build this program carefully. So let me show you what we're going to do today. All right, so I've got running the entire finished code here. I'm just going to run it and show you what it does do. And what we're going to create. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to create a really simple text editor software. That text editor software is going to load and save files. And I'm providing you the load and save file code. And I'm not going to walk through how it works entirely as far as the load and save file code runs. I'll save that for another time, but I am providing you all that work, and I'll explain a little bit how it works, but just very briefly. So this is the window that's going to get created by our code, and this window, as you expect, has your standard minimize, maximize, and close buttons. It also has a title. You'll notice that it's quite small, and the title is actually cut off, so I can drag this bigger like you'd expect out of any particular window. So the idea behind this, you can see there's an open file button. There is a save file button. There is a text field that is white. There is a label with black text and red that indicates that this is where the file name is supposed to go. And then there is a text area that is in green. So I deliberately created these ugly color combinations here just to kind of really make things stand out. So a couple of things you need to understand, first of all, that this is something called a text area. Sorry, this white is called a text button. This white is called a text field, my apologies, and this green is called a text area. The main differences between a text field and a text area are that text fields are used for one line of text. So you can't like hit enter and continue to have more and more lines down your page. If you want to do that, you need a text area or some other types of similar related things. So now let me show you exactly what this does. I'm going to hit open file, and at first it's going to give me an error because I have not put a file name into this box. Okay, and it gives me an IO error called the file not found. Now in this particular program, I have a series of files I've used for other videos I've shown. And so I've got a members.csv file, which is stored in a subfolder called data. So I'm just going to type in my file name, data / members.csv. Now, those of you that have a lot of background in code that happen to stumble across this video, you're going to find that the code I give you is not the most efficient. It's certainly not the most professional. What it is a combination of a couple different examples that I use to sort of teach all these different file concepts and GUI concepts separately in a really, really clean way, but it's not necessarily the most efficient. Definitely isn't the most efficient code, so please bear with me on that. But when I hit open file, what it does is it fills in all the data that happens to be in that text file. And like any other text editor you'd expect, I can make a change. So maybe I'll say Jack here is actually supposed to be Jackie, and I hit save, and it doesn't appear to do anything there, although down here in my console it does say save to members. If I was to open up a different file just to show you what would happen, first I'll open up divisions, which I believe is nothing fancy. I spelled that right. Oh, error file not found. That's okay. I probably made a little spelling mistake. But then if I would go back to my members one, which I saved a minute ago, and open that one, you'll see it's back, and you'll notice that Jackie has been saved. So this is the program we're going to create here in a moment. All right, so here we are ready to go. So I've created a new Java class. Just I did a standard Java class creation in IntelliJ. Again, in the next videos, I'm going to show you how to use the actual builder for GUI. So we'll do it a slightly different way. You could ignore the package line. That's just based on the fact I'm doing this in a series of examples. In other words, yours won't be there. You can just delete. Don't copy that off of my code. If you do have a package, you use it. Now, then what you're going to do is you're going to open up this file and you're going to copy everything down here into that particular file. So you notice that my class, I'll stop here before I actually paste it in. You'll see, Control C. I did name this to be CoopPad. Cooper is my last name, so that's why. If you don't name it this, you'll find there's a few different places you're going to have to change the code. I'll just point those out here in just a minute once I paste it in. So you notice I'm pasting over everything except for the fact I've got that extra package line at the top. And I'm going to go through this. Now, if you didn't name your file CoopPad, here are the things that you'd have to change from my code into your Java class with whatever name. So there is the first use of the word CoopPad. So let's say you called yours, I don't know, GUI example 1. So you change this to GUI example 1. You also have to change this constructor method to GUI example 1. You will also, down in main, have to change it in 2 places where it says CoopPad here and CoopPad here to your GUI example 1. So that's how things are going to go. All right, let me first walk you through all of the different things that are part of this. First of all, there are several import statements, and there's more import statements than we need to do. I want to talk to you about what swing is, and I want to talk to you about AWT is, and the io.star is the input-output for the file. So I will briefly talk about that towards the end of the video. Essentially, AWT is the original version of the Java GUI Windows-based stuff. That has since been largely replaced with a library called Swing. And so the import for the Swing is in javax.swing. And you just need to know that that's the standard libraries that you use for most things. I have a couple little things in this code that are a little bit older and that use the AWT stuff as well. So that's why. I'm not going to go through absolutely every line of all this because, again, you're going to need to you're going to have IntelliJ create this for you after this example anyway. So here are the different areas of the program I've created and set up for us. So there's my text area that I just called text area. I've got 2 buttons, a read button as in a read file button and a write file button. I got a text field, which is the name field, in this case meaning the name of the file. I've got a label, which just basically says is just text, and it just says file name here. And I've got a panel that I've called inner window that you'll see make reference to in a little bit. The other things that are built in here is I have a main class that has nothing in it. And then down below here I have my read and write text files. Again, I'm not going to go through all that stuff and how that works in this video. Okay. All right. So first of all, if I was to run this program right now, it will run, but nothing will happen. And it's going to, just give a second here to make sure that this runs, and yeah, there we go. So it finished its run, and notice nothing happens. Why does nothing happen? Well, nothing has happened because main hasn't done anything. We have nothing that's set the code in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to start to release some of the stuff here, get the window to start opening up with very limited functionality, and then we'll start to add a little bit more of the functionality. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to uncomment everything in main. I'm going to use Control/, depending on how you've pasted it in. If you select it all and do Control/ it gets rid of it. So let's walk through this. So this is a line that just creates an instance of this class. And so it creates a new instance of CoopPad called window equals new CoopPad, a really simple object-oriented programming line. If you haven't done much object-oriented programming, that's not a crucial thing to fully understand what's going on, other than that creates the start of this window. And what it does, it causes the function, the method up above to run. You can see that this window.setSize is a pretty obvious thing. And once you see it, when you run it, you'll see it's a 400 wide to 200 thing. So we'll show you we can change that. And then these 2 lines are kind of housekeeping lines, but they are important. You need the set visible to be true. This is the thing that actually has your window come available. And this thing, set default close operation, is actually what happens when you press the X button on the top right corner of your window or your top left circle on your in a Mac window. And you would think it's automatic that when you press that X button it closes, but that's not the case. In fact, you have to set that, and that's what this does. It says, what do you want to do? Well, we want to exit on close of this particular JFrame. There's other things you can do where you can say dispose if you want to have multiple JFrames going not usually done in professional programs, but often done in learning environments. So you could have a dispose where it disposes one and not close the entire program. This closes the window and shuts the program down. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the top, and I'm simply going to uncomment this line super, which means create a instance of JFrame. For those of you, again, have done object-oriented programming, you'll understand that this extends JFrame, means that it is going to be inherit information from JFrames, and so that's what this is. So it says, how do you create a new window? All you have to do is pass in a title. So now if we run this, you will see that it should create a window. If I haven't forgotten to add something here in a minute. There it is. There's my simple window. It has my title. You notice right now it's 400 by 200. Let's just go and change that just for display purposes. Make that 600 by 400, and you'll see right away that it creates, as you'd expect, a 600 by 400 pixel window. And of course, the size of that is dependent on your pixels. So there's my editor. Okay, not too bad. All right, now let's start adding some of the real content. So remember, I have these things here. So what it's going to do, the first thing it's going to do is going to add this panel to this thing. Actually, sorry, first of all, it's going to do is it's going to set what's called a grid layout for this. And the layouts are pretty hard to kind of fully understand and fully grasp early. But the idea is it's going to create what's called a grid layout, which creates a 2 by 2 sort of layout of the grid. And you'll notice that I had my button, and then it had a text field and followed by a label. So you can see it kind of creates a little bit of a grid. Layouts are a little bit tricky to get your head around. This basically sets this up. Then what it does is, remember, the inner window is this panel. Panel is a container. So it then goes and adds 4 things to that panel. The two buttons, the field where I typed the file name, and the file. It hasn't added the text area yet. We'll show you that in just a second. Then what it does is it creates another type of layout called a border layout. So the line this.getContentPane. GetContentPane, if you remember from the last video, is the key inner workings of a JFrame. You have your JFrame itself, which is the window, then you have a menu bar, and then you have a content pane. So that's what this is. So this sets up the main thing. So it creates a different kind of layout called a border layout. And what the border layout basically is doing is it's creating sections. Again, I'm not going to go into layouts right now. It's far more complicated than we want the first time. But essentially what it does is you'll see that it adds the inner window panel, which includes just these 4 things, to the north or the top part of the screen. It adds what's called a J scroll pane, and that's going to allow my text area to potentially have a scroll bar if I need it. And then it adds the text area, which is the big green box, to my content pane. Okay, so now if I run this, you'll see that it has a window looking like what we want without a lot of functionality. Okay, and no color scheme yet. Okay, but you'll actually see that these things work. I can type in here. I can type in here. You notice there's my text field property. I can hit enter and type many things. You notice I cannot hit enter up in my text field. There's my key differences. Okay, so the colors haven't been changed. There's no font alterations, but at least the code works. And of course, it doesn't do anything. Open file doesn't do anything. Save file doesn't do anything. There's no functionality yet. Okay, all right. Now, the next 2 lines are kind of obvious once you see them. These are set background color. And the properties that you can do with all these different things will become obvious as you work your way with IntelliJ. But you can see these. I did first 2, set a background color of red for the inner window and the background color for green. Now, the inner window, remember, is the panel that contains the 2 buttons and the text fields. The text area is the big part. So let me run that again, and we'll show you what that looks like. Now, the inner window is red, but what you'll notice is that by default, the buttons that pop up will fill all the space that they need. So there's so it's filling it all. It's filling it all. My text field is filling it all, but my label only takes up a little bit, so the rest of the red is in. And if you look really closely, you can see the red kind of poking in and around the outside of the other parts. Okay, not obvious how to make these changes. If you work with different there's lots of different color codes. I just picked like 2 really basic, really contrasting, so you can see. Okay, now here is my text, you notice it's nice and small. Okay, so let's change that. I have my text area. You'll notice there's a set font line in here. And again, I can do the same thing with my name field if I want. So I've created to an italic 20. There's multiple different ways to do this. But if I run that now, again, you'll see that it works. And as you'd expect, you'll have a bigger font that's italic for the text area. The original one is still the same. So let's just double check that's the case. There we go. You can see it's a little bit bigger, right? Text area is still the same because we haven't changed it for that. If you want to change it for that, we can do the same thing. Same line of code. Whoops. That would be real bad. And except it was called the name field, and I'm quite certain, although I actually didn't test this ahead of time, that that text fields use the same set font code as the other ones. Let's just make this 18, and maybe we'll go font dot, I believe dot bold is one. There we go, it's popping up, B-O-L-D. We'll go a little bit bigger in 10, you won't be able to read it all. Let's say 15, and run it again, and you'll see this will do what you expect, right? So now if I want to type in the name of a file, up top, how we do for time? 16 minutes, a little longer than I thought, but that's okay. But now you can see there that's a little bit bolder and a little bit bigger. And again, just by contrast, you can see that's the italicized. It's not bold. Okay, so we're working pretty good so far. So how's the picture, the big pictures to look at so far? Because now we've got the things. Is you create your components. One of the main components I've done is a container that's going to allow me to kind of arrange my stuff. You end up setting up your JFrame using a super and then the lines down in main. You use a content pane as the main part of your area, and then you add stuff into your content pane. And it turns out that maybe I did this not quite in the best order, that I added the panel to the north, which is part of this border layout style layout, and that panel contains these four things. And then I did two things regarding the text area. One of them I gave them scroll bars. And the other thing is I added to the center, which again is part of the border layout. Again, you don't need to worry about that part so much for now. All right, so now all we need to do is give it some functionality. All right, now things get complicated if we're writing this code entirely by hand. The Java uses what are called listeners. A listener is something that's looking for or listening to something to happen in your program. In this case, what we're going to be looking for is a mouse click on our buttons. And so what happens is you see that there's these two lines called add listeners. So I'm just going to do my control slash there. So we've added what's called an action listener to the read button and the action listener to the write button. Again, you don't need to know exactly what this code does in detail, but if you look up to my main thing, you'll notice that it uses some extra thing called implement action listener. Again, that's a high-level object-oriented programming concept that talks about implements. You don't need to really worry about that, but essentially what you need to know is that we now have this thing called an action listener. And there's one of them added to the read button and one of them added to the write button. Remember, that's the read the file and the save the file button. So what it's doing is it's saying, okay, those two things are buttons. We're going to now have an action tied to them. Now, if we scroll down to the very bottom of the code, you'll see there's something called action performed. The action performed is sort of the default function for standard actions to happen on any particular component. So a standard action, of course, to happen on a button is if it's clicked. So the action performed function gets run by Java whenever a default action happens on a particular component, such as a button. So I'm going to uncomment that code and look at what this says. So first of all, the first thing it does, because I'm working with files, is it says, okay, I need to go and get the name of the file that I can use for my load and save methods. So I go to the name field, I call .getText. So go get the text out of that text field, bring it back, save it into a string called file name. Okay? Then what I do is I look at the source of the action. Is the source of the action the read button? If so, we're going to clear the text area by setting text to nothing, and then call my read text file function that I've custom written for this particular application. Else, because I only have 2 buttons with listeners attached, call my write function, passing in the text area's name and passing in the file name that I've just read. Okay, so what do those do? Well, let's go look at the read file. And again, I'm not going to run through every single line of this because mostly this is file IO stuff. That's a different thing. But essentially, these are the lines that it does. It goes and accesses the file I want. And it appends, text area.append is how you add more and more lines to a text area. So it does this in a while loop. As long as there's more lines left in the program, it keeps running, keeps running, keeps running. It appends that line and adds a backslash n, in other words, a new line character. So it keeps adding and adding and adding and adding to the thing as long as it's finished. Okay. If, however, it doesn't find the file, it gives me an error, and one of a couple errors depending on the type of problem. When I write, which is the save, remember, essentially what it does is it basically pulls the text area out and is able to write directly into the text area, the save file. Now, this particular write, load, and save is built based on, like I said, a pre-existing example that's mentioned on the web link document. So I actually don't teach it to be exactly like this. I use a slightly different set of classes for read and write, but I wanted to give credit to the original authors of the example and kind of leave it with their code. So let's go test to see if this is working properly now that I've uncommented that. I believe the whole thing is uncommented. Let's run and see if we've got this fully working. Now, when you run it, of course, you might not have files ready to go, saved up. I've also created a data folder previously, so that's usually where I put my stuff. So let me kind of do this like you might do it right from the beginning. So I'm going to create a file. You always want to give it an extension in this file name because otherwise this won't do what we want to do. So I'm going to call it testfile.txt, for example, and I'm just going to put, let's just put some random stuff in here. Doesn't matter what it is. Okay, I'm going to hit save file. It should run the code, and it will also, I believe, in a moment, give me a save file thing here. I haven't got error, but I haven't got what I expected. So we'll see what happens. Just a second, I'm going to pause because I'm not sure what's going on here. All right, just had a little bit of a brain blip there. So I've cleared my file since you last saw it here, but you'll notice down here on my IntelliJ here, I have that testfile.txt. So let's go see if it actually saved. Remember that I just put random stuff in it, so it may be hard to tell, but if I hit open file, you should see it's there. Let me show you where it exists. So if you've never worked with the standard file saving in IntelliJ, what it does, it goes into your project folder. So I'll have to go and find this particular file. And show it right there. Let me just go grab it. All right, and here that file is textfile.txt inside the project folder. So notice there's my src folder. There's my data folder. So ideally I would be putting inside data folder, but you would have to use data slash in order to make sure it goes in the right spot. You'll notice that it created this file for me when I didn't have one that pre-existed. If the file exists, it will write over the old file. But again, that's a different discussion about how file editors work. So that is the big picture. What do I really want you to get your head around? The idea that there are several components that you create. Then you have to add them via a content pane. So you create a content pane first. With those content panes have a layout. You add panels. You generally add components inside panels, and then you add your panels into your content pane. You can give each of those particular components a series of properties such as font or colors. You create a listener that will look for and watch the user, whether or not they click a particular thing or click into a particular thing or move a scroll bar, etc. And that runs some sort of action that does some sort of code. In this particular case, it saves. So that's building a GUI from scratch. Quite a lot of, this is quite a long video, almost a half hour long. But now you should have a really good feel for the way that the structure of a GUI program works. And now we can start having IntelliJ do a lot of this for us. And we'll start that in video 3 by creating a simple calculator in IntelliJ's UI GUI designer.